Hello and welcome, and I'm your host, Constantin Kogan, and I'm delighted to have here today William Entriken, who is the lead author of ERC-721 Protocol. Hi, William.
Hello. Cheers.
Listen, it's a real honor, and I'm sure we're going to have a very interesting conversation today. And listen, that this is the one of the most important, I would say, technical advances for NFT, and not many people understand that. So the fact that we're talking with you as a lead author is really interesting for me personally, and I hope for my audience it will be exciting. Traditionally, before we start, I have to throw a disclaimer that this content is for informational purposes only. You should not construe any such information or any other material as legal, tax, investment, financial, or any other advice. Now that we're off the hook, we can start. And I want to know more about you first, William. What led you to crypto? What made you got excited into crypto as tokens and NFT as a separate concept? And how did you come up with one of the most important protocols in the industry?
Cool. I mean, I'll start with my neighbor. So my neighbor was the one who tried to get me into Ethereum for years and years. He's also the guy who started DeFi. Coincidentally enough, he's also from Philadelphia. I'm from the Philadelphia area. His name's Rob Leschner, and he started Compound Finance, which is the whole DeFi movement. And he was trying to bring me into DeFi from before it even was called DeFi. They didn't even have a name for it back then. And never got into it. And I was just kind of lurking, just studying the space. I knew this is 2017, things were starting to get exciting. This is back when you would do ICOs and you would send Bitcoin to people, and then they would email you an address like with your seed phrase in it to get your tokens.
I remember this.
And you would get another account to move the tokens over. So that's historical context. So I came onto the scene and I'm just lurking, I'm just watching. And I said, what is there for me to get involved with if it's not DeFi? Because I wasn't really happy about that. And I saw CryptoKitties. I saw they have pictures of cats. Obviously, there's other ones before CryptoKitties, but that was really the one that just made such a big mark. And I saw these pictures of cats and they were trading. And I said, you know what? There's something way bigger, like many orders of magnitudes larger than this. And this is back when the entire CryptoKitties market size was like $1 million. I said, this is not $1 million. This is not $1 billion. This is a very, very large thing. And I saw it. It just clicked. And then I saw everybody else was getting inspired, but mostly because they just wanted to make copies of the cats. And I said, you guys are not seeing this. Like you're seeing like a little bit of the pie for you. You're not seeing what I'm seeing here. And if there's a pricing mismatch, you just got to jump into the market, right? So I said, okay, I'm going to get involved any way I can here, and that's the beginning. So that's just the vision. And I give this speech a few times, NFT NYC, Miami. It's the 10-year plan, and we're not even halfway there. We're in year 4 right now. This is all on track. So this is definitely what I saw. The artwork, some of these other applications. We've got a lot more to do here. And this is immediately what I saw from the beginning. We are totally on track. And that's what I saw. Mm-hmm. That was my inspiration to get started, was this vision.
So who are your co-authors for ERC-721 Protocol? And please let us know, how did you get engaged with this particular protocol? Like what made you so lucky to begin this revolution with NFTs?
So luck came from, good timing and preparation, right? Mm-hmm. So my background was I just have a lot of experience in open source leadership of projects. I worked with Google for a minute, and I worked on Linux, just very large open source projects. Google paid me to work on Linux. So that was just that's a great opportunity to just get involved. They give you a mentor. And this is remote working like 20 years ago. So my experience is in open source and bringing programmers together to agree on some things, this is before GitHub, this is before all that stuff. And when I came here, what I saw was there was a specification that was coming, something else I've experienced with, but there was no agreement on the specification. There were different drafts. Actually, there were 4 or 5 different versions of ERC-721. And there were different people with different opinions. And this was going to be a disaster. So I saw this and I said, guys, we cannot have fragmentation in this market. We have to launch together. The vision here includes you launching things on one platform and selling them on another platform with a different wallet. And that was the winning vision. So I told everybody, I said, listen, I'm new here. This is my first project, but I will definitely get this done quickly. And I will definitely do this with everybody agreeing. And I can promise that because I'll show you some of my experience in open source projects. And that was the winning proposition. People said, I want to launch now. I don't want 5 versions. And somehow I got nominated to be the CEO of NFT. And I was willing to do anything. I was willing to mop the floors here, but I got my name first. And Dieter Shirley is actually the one who started this. So Dieter created this proposal. He was doing 2 things. He was making CryptoKitties. He was the CTO of Axiom Zen, which is now Dapper Labs and Flow and all these things, Top Shots. And he was working on selling cats and then standardizing a thing. And then the cats got really popular. So just, that's an understatement. So of these 2 things, his time went to the cats and not so much the standard. So people are just asking him questions and he's not replying. And it takes a lot of work to get this thing past the finish line. So I said, okay, well, I'll throw my hat into the ring as a 6th standard. You know, there's an XKCD number for this, but like there's another standard. And I just started calling every single person out there, like on the phone, old school, because not everybody wanted to chat on GitHub. They were a little embarrassed of like saying something that makes them sound stupid. I said, guys, I'm the newest person here, so you're not going to sound stupid talking to me. So I called them up on the phone one by one, and I was trying to gather co-authors and supporters at the same time. So that's the intro. So Dieter, he's the 2nd co-author. He's the godfather, the originator, the founder of NFT. Then we got Jacob Evans, also working very hard on debating these things back and forth. What should we do? What should we not do? Kind of setting the scope. And then Natasha, she worked for one of the first implementations. So as we were coming out with the standard, we didn't have any implementations. So you had to, right now you just copy paste. That's because we make it copy pasteable. Back then, people are getting hacked left and right because there's nothing to copy paste. You were doing it from by yourself every time. So these are the co-authors with some diverse opinions here to bring you the standard.
So this is really interesting. When I was reading about the history about you guys launching it, there was, again, there are multiple challenges in this, and the concept of non-fungible tokens, it was very early, I remember, as you mentioned, 2017, we had some meetings in New York, it was less than 50 people, and mostly it was like degens, more of a, little bit of lawyers, a little bit of Wall Street guys who were thinking, okay, let's tokenize some real estate. Why not? Let's use this as a tool. So it was less about art. It was less about the bigger picture. It was all about okay, so this is an interesting financial tool, how to make money out of it, right? And then it's a novel, sure. but it was something completely untouched, and as tabula rasa in the entire industry. Now, fast forward 4 years, we see there's a huge progress, and we see billions of dollars pouring into it. The entire market cap is insane. And then we see communities are being formed who are flipping it, who are buying, selling. We're seeing in-game assets with examples of Xfinity, Sandbox, and a lot of games, which obviously we invest in, and we're very excited about it. We understand the practical activity. Yeah, Bull Perks and GameSpad, that's full disclosure. We invest in a lot of, so a lot of in-game assets, the NFTs, so the NFTs where we have the utility. But I want to ask you more technical question about also the protocol, not to go into the other part of things, which is investment is exciting for me, but I want to learn from you more. I'm sure you're familiar with ERC-1155, right? And that was a little bit, later than what you guys created. And it was supposed to be improvement, fungibility agnostic, structure. In my, again, not to criticize anything, in my perspective as a person who's more on the investment side and a user, I mean, it's not super healthy, and it's not it's not helping a lot the entire usability, right? It might have a lot of functionality, better functionality, which I'm happy to hear your opinion on this. But where do you see the difference? Maybe you can explain it in layman terms of both ERC-721 and 1155.
So take you back to the design decision of 721. Okay, so what's the difference? 1155 allows you to create lots of fungible tokens, like ERC20s. It is great for that. You should not even use ERC20 unless you're doing something very specific. If you've got a game, you should always use 1155. It is made for that. It's beautiful. It's got some great features for tracking stuff inside of games, something where you need a lot of tokens. In fact, there's probably an argument to be made that you should never use ERC20 at all. There should just be one central repository of ERC20s, and it should be implemented using 1155. And then quickly, obviously, people came out with the idea, well, if it's a fungible token and there's only one of them, isn't that non-fungible? They expected that question, and they have kind of a workaround for how to do non-fungible tokens with 1155.
Mm-hmm.
But to be clear, me and this team who wrote 1155, we've both publicly come out, talked about this on various forums answering this question, and we don't recommend that. So although you can use NFTs under 1155, you probably shouldn't. Both of us recommend you should use 721 for NFTs. Everything else you should use 1155, unless you have a specific reason. Otherwise, a specific articulable reason. And I've used both. I've used 1155, 721, 777. I've used every single one of them I've used. And, I'll break that rule myself. I'll use 1155 for a non-fungible token if there's a reason. Usually not. So maybe what is the actual difference here?
Yeah, we can provide maybe some use cases, maybe easier. Like, how would you use specifically, let's say, the one use case, 721, which makes more sense for this particular case, and then 1155, which is much more superior, as you mentioned, like, let's say, the game, and like when there's like, let's say, over 100,000 assets or more, I don't know.
Yeah. So let's talk about the difference between fungible and non-fungible stuff. Mm-hmm. If you've got a game and you've got undifferentiated weapons that you can equip. So you've got a game, you've got swords, and the swords aren't numbered. They don't have unique artwork. They don't have histories attached to the sword. They're just a quantity of swords, and you have to spend them. Maybe like if you're playing Candy Crush, I think there's like leaves or something. So you get so many leaves, and it's not like leaf number 17 and leaf number 25. They're just leaves. They grow on trees. So it's just a really matter of how many do you have, or like bombs. You buy bombs. You throw the bomb, it explodes. Nobody cares where the bomb came from or who traded it with who. So for bombs, you really just care, how many do you have? That's an ERC20 if you're going to track it on blockchain. 1155 is way better because with ERC20, you're going to have bombs, and then you're going to have, swords or other expendable things, maybe like rags of clothing, like maybe not real armor, but armor that just gets slashed when you're using it, or lightning bolts, magic quantity, stuff like that. Something that's expendable and doesn't really matter so much. And then you're going to have loads of just different ERC20s out there. That means if you open MetaMask, you're going to have 17 different kinds of, you're going to be scrolling. In game 1, you have 20 lightning bolts. In game 75, you have 20 swords. It's too much. Mm-hmm. So for cheap things, 1155 really makes sense. And they're optimized for games. They're made by a gaming company, Horizon. So it's genius. You got one contract. It's going to track how many swords you've got, how many lives you've got, how many XYZ you've got. It just makes so much sense. And it all brings it together, which is the whole point. So it's very similar, the ERC20 and the ERC1155. Conceptually, implementation-wise, they're very similar. But the benefit is that semantically, they're bringing all of your assets together. And so it's a nice thing. It's like having your desktop with 90 files in it, or having one folder and putting most of your stuff in that folder. There's different types of people in this world. I'm not going to ask you which one you are, but I think we all know where we aspire to be.
100%.
So that's what 1155 is.
I appreciate the
explanation. That's in terms of fungible stuff.
And that we're talking about like that. It basically grabs this information with the help of metadata and different IDs, right? So that's how it differentiates. Because again, on a back end, I assume as you mentioned, there can be either a finite number of swords or arms, armory, or whatever the in-game assets, or it can be created almost an infinity. So this is another difference, so it also creates, like, as you mentioned, like an ontology or semantics, the opportunity to even read this data easily, and it helps you as a project developer, right, and as a person who needs accountability to monitor everything in one easy way. Correct?
Yep. So it organizes it for you.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's talk about non-fungible assets. If you've got, typically we think of non-fungible things as more valuable. Typically when you buy stuff, here's my kitchen, this conference room I'm in. So here's stuff you can buy. Here's a cup, no serial number. Here's food service aluminum foil from Reynolds. It's got a UPC number, but every time you buy it, it's going to have the same UPC number. All right.
No product placement with the Reynolds. They're not sponsored.
None. Here's a toaster. No serial number.
Mm-hmm.
No, this one has a serial number. I'm not even going to open it, but this is some brand of microwave. I can guarantee you this has a serial number.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the difference? All the cheap stuff has no serial number, and the expensive stuff has a serial number.
Mm-hmm.
This is how humans work. When there's a warranty, you don't get a warranty on Reynolds wrap. You get a warranty on something that matters. You don't track ownership of things that don't matter. If it gets stolen, you don't report it to the police. So there's a threshold where things become valuable enough that you want to track them. That's the NFTs. So as we apply this to games, if your game has typically you want to track it and you want to know how many there are in the world, because that adds value too. This is not investment advice, but there's a value to limited things, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you've got a game and you've got bombs, and you're just throwing out bombs, you're killing zombies, right? The sword might be different. If the sword costs, let's say, $100, $100 US or something like that, and the sword, maybe you have to earn it or create it. It's a process it's like a really big deal to get this sword. And then you could sell it to someone else. And here's the key part. If you kill certain beasts with the sword, then it remembers that this sword killed this beast. I hope it feels a little different what I'm describing. I feel like this sword has a history. Your wall's got 5,000 years of history. Okay, so there might be a sword on that wall that contributes to the history of this whole thing that you've got going on. This is a story behind you. So
Mm-hmm.
if the sword is a major part, it's not going to be, this sword's going to have a name, is what I'm saying. This sword is going to have a name. There's a few swords in the history of humankind that have names, right? And so if you're making a game and you're promoting swords to this level, they're going to cost a lot more than these bombs that are just
Mm-hmm.
dropping. Unless the bombs have names, unless they're nuclear bombs. That's those ones have names. But I'm saying, if you care enough to give something a name and a number, that's an NFT.
Yeah. So that's a system to uniquely identify digital assets in a nutshell, right? And numbered, exactly.
Unique, yeah.
Yeah. And you can create packs, you can create, batches, there are all different variations how you can do that, right? And it's up to you. But you have to pick the design and you have to decide for yourself which one is better. Okay. So maybe we can, since we're closing this topic, the last point, you mentioned, that you also use 777, right? Which is, to me, I've never used it personally. So I'm curious, what will be the application of, 777?
777 has an extra little feature inside that allows you to attach some functionality when you move tokens. It's kind of got some programmability on the buy side and the sell side. This is really just a technical detail, and nobody wakes up in the morning wow, I want my tokens to be programmable. That's not something that people care about. People don't care about, when I send a token, I want to get an email. They're not ideas that people have.
Mm-hmm.
So as you're designing a system, you can implement it using 777 or 20, 1155. They're all very similar. It's just a choice. And really, honestly, they all do the same thing. So as you're designing your system, there's different features that these tokens have, and you just pick one that you like. Using 1155 for NFTs versus 721, they can both basically do the same thing too. Some people say that, 1155 allows you to do batch transfer. You can do batch transfer with 721.
Got it.
So people complain about MetaMask. I heard from you, MetaMask isn't set up. Yeah, I mean, that's painful. MetaMask is very slow moving in this industry, a lot slower than I'd like. And if you're a competitor to MetaMask, call me. I'd like to work with you. But this is, these are the limitations we have with the resources we have now. We're only 4 years into this.
Yeah, I know, and this is the thing. Like, a lot of the users. So our job is like, we did several INOs, what we call initial NFT offerings. So you basically think about it as a path-through vehicle when we help people, we introduce them an opportunity for an NFT, and they can buy it, and then we distribute it. So on our side, we experience the problem is that like some of the, first of all, the education on using the wallets and actually and seeing the NFT, because you see with ERC protocols, it's actually more or less like standardized, and you can actually see it if it's an OpenSea, a Rarible, other like popular platforms. It's easy. Now, if we're going to a little bit further like steps, we're talking about, let's say, ERC-721 or any other, or let's say Polygon. There we're starting to have a lot of like a new can of worms which we're opening, because sometimes you don't see anything on your MetaMask, right? And then there's an issue, right? So you technically, the transaction shows that it's complete, it's successful. You don't see anything, right? So you kind of, those are like more technical difficulties and operational difficulties that you're going through, and nobody sees them, like, before you actually interact or you mint your first, I'm not even touching Solana. That's a different beast. I'm not going to even address it, but so those are the things. So I'm just curious to ask you, not to go deeply into those challenges, like, what do you foresee as, the challenge, like that we've seen in a token space, where the consolidation of the composability, like, interoperability, they're trying to build like the layer 2 or 3 solutions to make sure that these problems will not appear. What do you see what's going to happen with NFT space?
It's rough. It's tough. As you have layer 2, as you have more scalability, you're going to have more things becoming tokens. So when I got started with this, we were only taking valuable things and make them into tokens. And the bar is coming lower and lower. Right now on Ethereum, it costs $50 to move an NFT or mint one or something like that. And that goes up and down a lot, obviously. So people only consider minting very valuable stuff, whether that's a picture of something or a picture of something else. People only own dozens. If you own hundreds of these things, you're a whale. But as you start tracking other things that are a lot cheaper, like your shoes, like things in your house, maybe food that you're eating, other stuff, it's not going to cost $50 to buy food that you want to track the lineage of or something. So, we're working on these projects. And so as that comes, the user interfaces and the platforms and everything we made, we're not going to be selling things on OpenSea when we're buying food at the grocery store. But I'll tell you, the grocery store will have NFTs inside. There will be NFTs in a lot more places. In the shoes that you wear, already happening. In the watch on your wrist, already happening. COVID vaccines, already happening. These things are already having NFTs in them. And so they work technically, but the experience is not really lined up with OpenSea and MetaMask and all these things. So the answer here is, if you're going to start making this industry 10x bigger by bringing in cheaper things or games with lots of NFTs, you really still have to own the user experience. Can't lean on me for that. So if you're buying and selling things that are worth at least $100 US, I got you. The whole marketplace is going to work. OpenSea is going to work. MetaMask is going to work-ish. Other websites are going to work. Websites you've never even heard of, they're going to work. Everything's going to work. But as you start making cheaper and cheaper things in NFTs, we really have to chart the path, because it's painful. There's a lot of pain. We haven't even mentioned the pain of buying Ethereum.
Oh yeah,
that's painful. Yeah.
Well, that's the reason why I think a lot of projects migrate, because the retail investors, they cannot absorb the gas fees. Like, they're insane. Like, especially like it's one thing when you're buying, exactly. It's one thing when you're buying $10,000 NFT, right? And then another thing is like if it's $100 NFT and you pay $50 in gas fee, that this is insane, so. Yeah. So I think there would be a lot of
even
different.
for layer two,
Oh, go ahead.
it's still painful. So
It is.
if you're going to sell something on Polygon or whatever layer two, and you better accept credit card payments. So this is what's happening. As I started when this was like, I could count on my fingers how many people did NFTs. And we keep, every year it's like times 10 or times 100 is per year. So as we multiply this by 10 every year, we're still getting people who know what Ethereum is or can buy tokens or have a friend that can give them tokens. We're reaching the point where as we go 10x more, we're going to be reaching out to people who don't know anybody, people that want these things, but they don't even know anybody who owns any Ethereum. They wouldn't even know how to get it.
Yeah.
They're like, do I go on Coinbase? What's a mask? What's a mask thing? I've used Chrome. I don't use Chrome. I use Safari. You need to support Safari.
Yeah.
This whole time, we're assuming you use Chrome or Edge. We're assuming you can get Ethereum. And at the same time, I tell my grandmom, don't answer the phone when the IRS calls you asking for your social security number. But then we want to tell my grandmom to go buy Ethereum where she needs to take a selfie with her webcam and her driver's license and then give her bank password to Gemini because they want to verify her account.
Yeah.
Before she, okay? So this is the same grandmom who would tell don't answer the phone when the government calls you because the government's a scam. This experience is way backwards. And so as we're reaching out to the next 10x people, we need to hold their hands. So the bad news is that you're going to need more investment. You're going to need companies that have the resources to have actual phone numbers for customer support when your credit card payment doesn't work, as opposed to the low-hanging fruit last year when you can just assume everybody knows how to figure this out. And you have zero customer support. You have anonymous companies located in Hong Kong. Always crap on Tether. Tether's located in Hong Kong. It's a bank. Their address is Hong Kong. No address, no name, no zip code, no postal code, just Hong Kong. And there's billions of dollars there. You can't do that going forward. So maybe the first, million people on Web3, they're like, yeah, send money to Hong Kong, whatever. It's a bank, it's not a bank. F the government. My grandmom is not that type of person. And I keep saying my grandmom, she's just a person. There's nothing, she's not particularly computer illiterate or illiterate or whatever. She actually can use computers. But as we bring our family members in, we need to hold their hands a little better.
Yeah.
And it's going to be more expensive and it's going to require, customer support, phone numbers, just a different way of doing business than we've done in the past.
Yeah.
And I welcome this because this is going to support the next 10x growth and the next 10x after that.
Basically, you're saying it's just another layer of adoption, and we need to be prepared to make it more user friendly and faster and cheaper. And it is what it is in everywhere, like in every niche. Like right now, there's more and more processing company that are actually getting into this business, and even for early tokens, right now when we researched the market, there was only 3 players who can possibly even potentially review the opportunity to convert your token into fiat. No real options. Right now there are much more, and this is good news, and it's still super early. And this is only with tokens. We're not talking about even like NFTs, which is another layer, right? So only mostly like young, I would say young. The reason why young, because they're more digital natives, more tech savvy kids are doing this right now massively, right? And you're right. So the other generations which are not so tech savvy, they're now a little bit left out. They might be willing to try out, but we need to build the infrastructure to make sure it's user friendly for them, right? And it'll be like few clicks, not just like entire tutorials and watch like 1 hour video how to do like one purchase. Doesn't work. I agree.
Yeah. These people, we want them in our group. We don't want to exclude them. These people play games. Not every gamer is a Web3 enthusiast.
Exactly.
We welcome these people. And this is really about inclusivity and growing our customer base. So we don't want to look at them as an out crowd. We don't want to look at them as, oh, they just don't get it. We don't get it. We're the problem. We have to adapt. We have to be better. We have to bring a better value proposition.
100%.
And your question again was, how does standards play into this? Well, standards get you so far, and it helps with all of these early adopters. But as we're going further, we're going to need more standards, and we're going to need more effort. Better companies, better businesses being built.
Do you foresee there will be one standard that would actually be also, I would say, composable and interoperable, for all chains? Because this is another issue. We're talking about, let's say, Solana, which is now getting more popular, and it's a completely different, beast. At least when we're talking about Ethereum, BSC, and Polygon, at least it's EVM, like Ethereum Virtual Machine. It's a little bit easier. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. So now when we're talking about Solana, now all of a sudden it's a completely different ecosystem, wallets, DEXs. So how do you see we will build something that will be, again, in terms of user experience, easy for end users?
Okay, so we're talking about NFTs on different platforms.
Mm-hmm.
And we're talking about moving NFTs across platforms.
Exactly.
Okay, so this is called an N times M problem. N times M. So the problem is that if you've got 10 platforms and you've got 5 projects, are you going to connect them 50 different ways, N times M? Or are you going to adapt, or are you going to make an adapter in the middle and you've got 5 plus 10, 15 different ways? This is the problem. Secondly, is a lot of these platforms are so different that it's really difficult and unintuitive to compare them. So a lot of people have an understanding of how Ethereum works, very broadly, which is all we need. They know, people intuitively, whether they get it or not, they understand it's secure. They understand when you own something, you own it. It's not going to be rug pulled. These are understandings, and I'm waving my hands because these are broad. But if Ethereum was hacked, that's it. Like if Bitcoin was hacked, which is similar technology, let's say, to Ethereum, similar, very. If you're a technical person, you're going to hate me, but they're basically comparable technology, Bitcoin and Ethereum. If somebody could hack Bitcoin, that's $1 trillion. You would know about that on the news. If somebody hacked Solana, that's less than $1 trillion. You might not hear about that on the news. That's where it's dangerous. So we've made front page on the news a few times with blockchain stuff, mostly related to NFT. And if there's a big problem, you hear about it. What hasn't happened yet, and which will shake this world a little bit, is when one of these other chains gets hacked, or there's a 51% attack, or there's a lot of attacks that just people don't understand intuitively. Mm-hmm. It's going to be a problem. If these attacks are possible and you're confused, then there's this theory in finance where if you've got dollar bills and some of them are backed by gold and some of them aren't, well, the ones that are backed by gold are going to be taken out of circulation. And the only ones that are going to circulate are these worse dollars. You can look up the name of this theory, but basically people are going to hoard the better thing if people can be suckered into buying the worst thing. How does this apply here? Well, if some third-party blockchain is less secure, then everybody's going to send their tokens there, and they're going to hack it, and they're going to get their tokens back for double spend. That's what's going to happen. Mm-hmm. And everybody's going to be upset. So this hasn't happened yet, and there's not enough stuff moving around. You cannot standardize this. So you cannot make a standard to do this. What you can do is explain this to people. You can explain the security guarantees that you have here don't exist here. So when you move it there, you might not get it back. So watch yourself. That's one concept people need to understand intuitively, quickly. Number 2, as you're moving stuff back and forth, there's a lot of different ways to do it. You've got third-party oracles. You've got, centralized exchange, decentralized exchange. Do you remember back in the day when we had decentralized exchanges where you could trade, Ethereum for Bitcoin? And how they all got shut down because they were actually centralized exchanges like Shapeshift?
Of course.
And then the SEC went after them. Okay, so what happens when you send all your NFTs to Solana and then you want them back, but the only company that moves them back and forth shut down, like Shapeshift, because actually they're an unregulated financial intermediary operating in the United States.
Yeah, that's what
do you do?
Who's going to be responsible? Yeah.
Well, no, you're responsible because you're the sucker who moved them across the chain and didn't understand it. So responsible, I don't know if that's the right word, but everybody's effed.
Yeah.
You've lost you lose everything if you move them. So That's fine. Responsible adults can make decisions. But as people who are setting up these systems, we should inform them that this is a high-risk activity and changes in regulation, which people think, oh, blockchain's unregulated. Shift shut down. Finance doesn't work in the US. Yep. A lot of companies are getting out of China. These things are happening. Regulation is working.
To be fair, they're just like, let's say Binance, for example, they just work under different, name, Binance US, right? So this is a different, like completely different, like legal. And what people don't understand that you need to have licenses. By the way, in the United States, it's a nightmare. You need to have it per state. So that means that Binance US is a separate legal entity, has a separate CEO, and as a completely different, like, they might have on a level of holding company, some connectivity, obviously, right? But on the other side, like, it should be, and you, even if we're users, I'm sure anyone who ever tried to log in from the United States to Binance.com, not the US, right? They would not have this opportunity. It doesn't allow you, like even on a basic level of, identification per your IP where you are, it will block you. And by the way, even DEXs, if you go to 1inch right now, like, or any other, like, aggregators, they're started to doing that because they, I just want to support William's point of view that they're started massively doing that. Like, people think that just because it's DEX, like, oh, it's completely decentralized, anonymous. No, it's not, and nope. You're being tracked, and it's super easy, by the way, to track you, especially when you're attempting to, to cash out in fiat. This is like the easiest way. This is better than cash, by the way. Cash is easier because it's not traceable, but this one is like perfect. So you have to be careful. I really support this narrative because, people, I think sometimes, play the anarcho games, and they don't realize that it's actually much easier to trace it.
Yeah, they can come after you 10 years later, 5 years later. The records don't disappear. It's not like, oh, yeah, it's going to be there forever. All you have to do is get caught once, and then everything you ever did is caught. I pay taxes on crypto. I sell my NFT project, and I'm looking forward to a very fun tax year this year. So like everyone else in this industry.
Let's talk about this side. By the way, let's talk about first of all, your projects, and you touched a very interesting part. Like, so on the IRS in the United States, for example, that they have a very clear framework. Actually, thanks God, now it's more or less like you have like an opinion on virtual assets and how to pay taxes on capital gains. Now, for the NFTs, it's a little bit more tricky. I think they're only starting to get into it. Like, and it's can you maybe explain how you're doing that?
So for my product, I'm a little bit special because I don't buy and sell NFTs. So that's a disclosure.
You're not
I'm super net neutral here. So I'm telling you about projects that I don't invest in. And that's really important to me to be neutral here. So I have more FOMO than anyone you could ever meet in your life, right? So I'm the first one in and the last one not in. So for the projects that I'm working on, I don't really look at the regulations so much. I really just think about how could I explain this if I were ever sued in court? How could I explain this? And also, because I made the first NFT that was under the standard, I'm demonstrating how I think other people should do it. So I'm kind of setting an example here. It's like, I'm doing it this way so that you can copy me and you can feel safe, because I'm, putting my family, we can get sued if I do something wrong. And I've studied this more than a lot of people. And so maybe you want to use that as a starting point for when you do your business. So I'm very careful in my product, not talking about secondary market, not telling you about the value proposition when you buy one of my NFTs, the project I'm working on, is that you can use it. It's for advertising. You buy it to advertise. And this is not financial advice or tax advice, but I think that if you're buying a billboard spot on my NFT, that's an expense to you, not an investment. It's basically just the same as buying billboard space outside. You're buying the billboard outside, you're buying one of my squares. It's just a billboard. So that's really simple to explain. And I've never said anything to the contrary. So, with these people, they'll look at something you said 5 years ago on Twitter. I've done zero. So I've been careful in this from day one. And so if anybody says, well, is this really an investment? Or is Squares an investment? Or is it? I'm like, guys, we've been very clear. No matter which way you look at this is an advertisement. So if people are buying an advertisement to advertise their stuff,
But you receive money, but you receive money in Ethereum, I assume, right?
Yep.
When you sell it. So that means what you need to do, you need to convert it into, let's say, stablecoin, USDC. That's for the sake of example. And then let's cash out on somewhere in Coinbase or Gemini, right? And that's when that's the moment when you actually pay capital gains, correct?
I mean, for me, I'm translating it right away. Also, I do sales with PayPal, which is super easy. Cash in, tax. And so from my perspective, I'll receive the Ether, quickly get it into USD, and then take it out, so that I don't do capital gains. I'm just doing this as revenue.
Got it.
So my income is not a capital gain. It's a sale. So I'm not trying to be in this market. I'm trying to sell things.
That makes sense.
So that's the way that I look at it, and that's the way I'm paying tax on it.
And what would
it could be a lot more complicated if you're selling NFTs and then translating it and then getting gains and losses. That's super confusing.
Yeah, because then you can just use this crypto to buy another crypto, right? And to, whatever, speculate, right? And then you need to kind of calculate the differences. That's when it becomes complicated. But by the way, what are you using for direct sale of Ethereum to USD, if I may ask?
This one, Coinbase.
Oh, okay. So Coinbase.
I use Coinbase. Yeah.
Got it. So you don't even change it. Okay. So directly. Okay, that makes sense. So that's the point. And you can even set up in Coinbase right now set up your company as a business, actually. So they immediately help you to translate it into dollars.
Yeah, it's a nice company and they're public. The reason why I work with Coinbase and I don't have any interest in them is just that they're a public company and they're not in Hong Kong. They have an address. They're on NASDAQ. They have people that will go to jail if they do bad things. So that makes me confident to work with them.
We're moving from decentralized narrative to very centralized, where the safeguards are still needed, which is ironic, but that's I'm sure that if you're going to talk about more of a Bitcoin maximalist, that this interview will not go well for them. This is just going to be a disaster, in their opinion.
I have a community service hour where I just take questions from the public 1 hour a week, and those guys don't last very long. They get smacked.
I'm sure.
Maximalists.
And
so bring it. But here's the question. So you're saying, this is centralized. Revenue, sales is centralized. Whether Ethereum is a token or whether it's money, it can still be debated in some jurisdictions.
Yeah, I agree.
But if you're trading that's decentralized. As soon as my opinion is, I run a business and I like the protection that the Army and whatever good things in the United States does for me, I'm happy to pay taxes. So when I sell things, that's taxable. So I recognize that and I do my duty of paying my taxes. If you're of the opinion that you're translating tokens to tokens and these don't have financial value, then your opinion might be that, this is a decentralized transaction. And there's plenty of decentralized markets for that too. So that's just a different opinion. That's not tax advice or securities advice or whatever. And that's fine too. But when it gets when you want to work with centralized is when you want to pay taxes and you want to get cash. When I pay for my daughter's college, I'm going to be paying in US dollars to send them to, some Ivy League school and not going to be using Ethereum to pay for that. So I need cash at some point. And but I do like the decentralized for that. A lot of other stuff is centralized. And I just wanted to distinguish that for you because there's a lot more applications in the future that are going to continue to be decentralized and not have so much to do with money. Right now, everything's talking about dollars and Coinbase and money and trading. Trading doesn't really apply so much to some of these new NFTs that we're going to see because there's not really a monetary value, but they're super valuable and they're super tradable. Like DAO tokens. Some of them have value. Some of them don't. Some of it's brand loyalty.
Or government.
I know a lot of DAOs kind of tie in the money part, but really, if it's really just a fan token, is that a financial asset?
Yeah. Speculative asset, and I'm sure people realize that it's just you piggyback it on fame of someone, and that's what it is, right? Some people even call it a very similar model as Ponzi scheme, right? Which you can debate about, of course, but that's the point. The markets are working in a way that somebody's losing, somebody's winning, right? You cannot always win. It's just impossible. Somebody you have a market cap, whatever, fully diluted, not diluted, and then it has think about it as a pot of capital, right? And if you're taking somebody's like trying to sell the portion of it, right?
Yep.
Money are taken from somewhere. They're not taken from ether, right? People are actually taking the value out of, others people pot. So that's the bottom line. So we talked
that's
about
still NFTs with money.
Exactly.
We've got NFTs that don't involve money.
Exactly. So
I've got NFTs that track COVID vaccines.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's buying or selling. They're just tracking the authenticity.
Yeah.
Sorry, correction. Not COVID vaccines, COVID tests.
Yeah.
So nobody's buying or selling a COVID test, but they do want to validate them. They do want to trace them. These applications are coming and they're beyond the market. There's no dollar value attached to these.
Yeah.
Super important, saving lives, traceable NFT. It's a little different.
What I would argue that technology that they provide, I'm sure the enterprise blockchain that is being used to actually trace that has value, but on a completely different level, right? And not per NFT, as you mentioned, right? But the entire logistics, the provenance or any other way to to show that this transaction and this whatever you're showing, whether it's a piece of art or a COVID test, exactly, this is authentic. The fact that it's proving that in a very transparent, mathematical, algorithmical way, that has value, right? Just different, right? Now, the question is, again, just to wrap up this part, because I'm sure we already talked about taxes, we talked about other aspects. So I wanna pick your brain a little bit about the future, right? So what do you think is going to be the future of NFTs and let's speculate a little bit 2022 and maybe, in a few years, which is light speeds, and 10 years. But I want to hear your opinion. Yeah.
So we've had 10x growth at least every year in NFTs. I'll tell you what, we're not going to have 10x growth for this year. We're not going to have 10x more media coverage.
Why do you think
we're not going to have 10x more? Well, it's not physically possible. So if you look at the front page of, I think it's the Wall Street Journal, I have all these clippings somewhere. I collect this stuff, of the Beeple sale, which is the entire front page of the newspaper. And you compare it to the New York Times moon landing, where a man landed on the moon. It's basically the same amount of space on the front page of the newspaper. So for us to have 10x growth, they'll need to change the way they make newspapers so that when you open it, it folds down like a Playboy, and then you get 10 more pages coming out the front page. There's got to be a nice gift for that. But it's you're going to open the New York Times, it's going to be NFTs, and then 10 pages of NFTs on the front page. They have to make the front page 10 times bigger.
You can buy a lot of digital media advertising.
Yeah, but 10x growth, what we're used to, is it's not possible on the physical newspapers. It'll barely be possible on some digital, on podcasts. We can't have 10x more people talking about NFTs and podcasts. There's not that many podcasts. We can't have 10x more people. We can't have 10x more. Maybe you can have 10x more exit scams. But in terms of advertising, how much more free press can we get?
A lot.
Pick a form of press.
I can do a form of influencers. I can tell you that there are still a lot of gaming influencers who are traditional influencers that have nothing to do with crypto yet, and they're still only getting into the space only now.
We have 2 South Park episodes about NFTs.
I know. I watched them.
Are we going to have 20? Things are possible, and New York Times can make their newspaper physically 10 times larger, and South Park episodes can get 10 times longer, but we should not expect that.
Okay.
And we should definitely not expect 2 years of that. We cannot expect 200 episodes of South Park dedicated to NFTs. And New York Times, that when you open it, you have to buy a bigger house because it doesn't spread out wide enough. There's just not that much growth in terms of free advertising.
Got it.
But there's definitely 10x growth in certain places. Influencers is part of this. So currently, up to now, from the first 1 or 2, when I could count on my hands how many people we have, to I think people know how big this is now, a lot of the people that have come into the space have come in from a certain place. Digital artists, people that were interested in Web3, blockchain, stuff like that. But as we're going forward, we will start to see traditional influencers. Influencers, not people that have 1 million followers on Twitter because they pump and dump NFTs, which there's too many of today, but you'll start seeing people because they sell makeup on Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
Those are the people that are going to start coming in.
Right.
And you don't have to be a genius to figure this stuff out. It's because these Web3 enthusiasts, they move faster. These are the ones calling me on the phone and asking me how NFTs work 3 years ago. These are the ones showing up at Hong Kong Nifty, at GG. These are the ones showing up at NFT and NYC. This is you showing up in Miami.
Mm-hmm.
These are the people that are connected. My grandmom's not in Miami trying to learn about blockchain, but she does other things. And that as we get to that world, that's where the growth is going to be. Influencers in the next 2 years is going to be influencers of non-technology things. Makeup, fashion, art. We barely have any artists that are established. Barely. We have a couple artists that are in NFTs, but the vast majority of the NFTs are just NFT artists. We're going to have actual musicians that other people, that your parents know about. So just people from the traditional world, they're going to be launching this stuff.
Athletes.
And that's going to be more than 10x growth in that segment for the next year.
Got it.
Because we've had like 0 so far.
Okay.
I've had so many musicians that are talking about it. They're just not doing it.
So I see. So you foresee there will be niches which were 10x, but not the overall industry, right? So okay, so that's an interesting perspective. Now, okay, so I know that your wife also like dabbled a little bit, like in NFTs, and she created her collection. Like, so do you want to talk a little bit about that? About the Sue Squares?
That's Sue Squares.
Yeah.
So this is the first one, and as we were standardizing 721, there were some complaints. Some people thought that it couldn't scale past like 1,000 NFTs, that the whole thing would just break. And these are kind of like flat earthers or something. Am I gonna get spammed out? But I'm like, no, guys, this scales. This totally scales. And they're like, well, prove it. So I had to say, okay, stop what I'm doing on all this standardizing stuff. I had to go implement. I said, look, we made this collection. It's called Sue Squares. It's the quickest project I could think of off the top of my head. It wasn't artwork. I guess that would have been faster. This is what is the fastest thing I could make and just sell and just prove that this whole concept works. So people stop trolling me and say this is going to be a dud. So we came up with Sue Squares, which is a complete copy of the $1 million homepage. And they're just little 10 by 10 pixels. And then you just buy them and you put stuff on the pixels. Nice. So it was a real simple project, but the whole purpose, and I named it after my wife as a goal that we would work on this project together. Because, I'm married and it's nice to work on things with your partner. And that's been good. Otherwise she's not going to let me travel. She'd be like, but now that her name's attached to it, maybe
you won some points,
Yeah, I got brownie points, which is worth more than any of this stuff. So we have the project, it launched, it works. And then more importantly for the community is I said, look, here's something you can copy paste. The code works. You can copy paste the code. You can study how it works. You can steal these ideas. The value proposition, it's not just technical. It's not just making a smart contract. How do you sell this? I've got a commitment on there that the website's going to stay online for 10 years.
Got it.
Nobody else does that. So that's something that I think people should do. If you're going to make a website and you're going to sell these things for $1 million on your website, tell people the website's going to stay online. Somebody might appreciate that. So these are the little... Yeah.
That is smart.
These are the nuggets.
Yeah, that is smart, and I'll share a link, in the description so that people can take a look and maybe buy like a pixel to complete the entire,
sold out.
The entire frame, and that's an interesting concept, so where would you? So we have 2 minutes. I just want to also be productive, so for people who are non-technical and they want to create their first NFT, where would you send them?
Class. So we have classes all over the place. They're on my website, for.net, PHOR. And so I'm a lot of NFT conferences. You can go there. If you're self-studying, I have a 1 hour per week free community service hour. All people are welcome. Ask anything you want. And I have, a walkthrough on how to do it.
Amazing. I will share your link on for.net, and then the fact that you're doing it, I assume for community hours, like for free, right? This is amazing.
It's free, yeah.
And that's I'm sure a lot of people will join your course. And the last question, which is more personal, and I never notify people about this because I want to hear your quick and genuine opinion, right? So, what is the meaning of life to you, William?
Yeah, it's all in the mind. So this is a very subjective question.
Mhm.
And it's the happiness that you bring with you every day and how you personally measure happiness yourself.
Perfect. You see, you were prepared. So, that's a beautiful answer.
That's from the hip. That's from the hip.
Yes. Listen, I really appreciate your time. I wanted to do it again. Like, there's definitely a lot of topics we can unveil, and there's a lot of things we can, talk about. And I will try to collect more questions based on this interview, right? So I think it was great.
Yeah.
I mean, really appreciate your time, and I wish, you would create more advanced protocols in the future, right? That will connect the entire system to more user-friendly space. Thank you. Thank you, William.
Thanks so much. Cheers. Happy 2022.